Hello, I'm Murray Newlands. Welcome to another episode of The Future of Engagement. I'm here with Ian, who's president of BuzzHoney. Ian, what do you guys do?
BuzzHoney is an interest graph marketing firm based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
And how do you work with brands, their content strategies to really drive ROI?
So recently we completed an engagement with the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. It's a large healthcare network based in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So they have many different hospitals within their healthcare network. They reached out to us to engage us on a strategy to help them understand competitively how they were leveraging content to drive engagement with their customers versus their competitors. They were simply looking at can they optimize that engagement through identifying better content sources, better trending content sources, and potentially uncover opportunities to curate content that's meaningful to their customers.
And what were the insights that you found?
So it was interesting. We had a number of different big aha moments as we were undertaking this project. We looked at about 30 different competitors, and first and foremost, at a high level, in the category, and we looked at other large healthcare networks, we looked at large clinical hospitals, and we looked at medical content publishers like WebMD.
Right.
And the big aha, the first big aha was that we saw across these 30 different competitors, we saw various levels of post volumes through Twitter and Facebook, and we saw outliers where large clinics like the Mayo Clinic had huge post volume. But there was one consistent, there was one consistency in the data that we found, which was no one was driving any significant or material level of engagement. That was a huge aha because it was everyone's out there posting at different volumes, and obviously it's not working. Nothing's working. The opportunity, obviously, is that our client could have a huge voice in the category by first understanding that, and more importantly, identifying what type of content can drive that engagement.
And were you able to, by looking beyond the sort of initial small pool, were you able to find the types of content that was driving engagement?
Yeah, it's interesting. So when we were able to kind of isolate just engagement levels, and we were looking at, all right, so post volume doesn't translate into higher levels of engagement. It's a fact, and we see that in every category. And it's pretty consistent. And a lot of brands make that mistake. They say, just throw content against the wall and that will drive engagement. When we isolate engagement levels, we saw that there were a couple of outliers in the data. One was Children's Hospital in Boston. We saw they were the only ones that actually had a nominal level of post volume and were driving a significantly higher level of engagement. When we isolated that data set, we looked more closely at the type of content. They were one of the key kind of takeaways that we had was how they were positioning the content. They weren't reporting the news. They were truly integrating calls to action within the type of content. So they were specifically talking to their audience and asking for them to do certain things, or asking for their feedback on a certain topic matter. And that was important. Now, they weren't, again, from an industry perspective, they weren't the bar that we wanted to set, but it was an interesting insight that we were able to take away and leverage on behalf of our clients so that they can begin to extract that and use that to their advantage.
It's really interesting that the people posting calls to action were also those getting most engagement.
Absolutely.
That's great.
Absolutely. And another example was we were looking at the recruitment side of their business. So how was UPMC effectively going out and recruiting other doctors to go work in their clinical hospitals versus their competitive set? And then we looked at a large consulting company. We wanted to put Deloitte and Touche, and they were one of the benchmarks that we wanted to kind of weigh UPMC against. And they were, when we put them in the data, they were one of the big outliers that we saw as well. Like when we were looking at the healthcare networks and the medical content publishers and the clinical hospitals, there was a lot of competitors driving high post volume but low engagement, with the exception of Deloitte. They were another one where we had much lower post volume but huge levels of engagement. When we dug into that content, we saw why. The competitive set was doing really kind of a lot of the same things. They were posting out to this job description. And so they were going after a certain, position within the hospital, and they were posting out to a job description that was, black and white text on an HTML page, and, and that was it. What Deloitte was doing differently, we found, was that they were posting out to landing pages that were leveraging dynamic media, rich media, and they were positioning it as as an experience. So it wasn't about a job; it was the experience of working at Deloitte. And they had 3 or 4 different landing pages that did this, and that's what was driving the engagement levels. That was the big aha, because no one in the competitive category was doing anything close to that. And so the key takeaway from that was obviously, okay, so this is about driving experience, but more importantly, how can we riff off of that to determine, what type, what's the unique experience for UPMC that's going to give them the competitive advantage in the category.
And what tools were you using to do this?
Infinigraph. I mean, Infinigraph was the only tool that we were using to do this. We looked at a couple of different tool sets, but none gave us the breadth and depth of insight that we needed very quickly and relatively inexpensively for the value that we got back in return. I mean, these are priceless insights that we were able to get on behalf of our client, and there was really no other channel that we would be able to get that type of data to be able to get that type of insight.
Excellent, Ian. And if people want to connect with you, how do they do that?
Well, they can email me directly at ian@buzzhoney.com. They can go to buzzhoney.com and visit our website, and there's a general contact info on the website as well.
Excellent, Ian. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
I'm Murray Newlands. You've been watching The Future of Engagement. I look forward to seeing you in the next show.